Millionaire caught on camera spoiling his mistress while his pregnant wife struggles at home. A jaw-dropping headline rocks the city. A wealthy philanthropist praised for generosity and charm secretly lavishing riches on his mistress at a five-star hotel while his pregnant wife faces her toughest days alone at home. This is no simple rumor or fleeting whisper. The scandal has a life of its own, painting the millionaire's polished public persona with strokes of betrayal and greed. In a whirlwind of lies, leaked footage, and whispered confessions, reputations crumble overnight. At the heart of it all stands a woman on the brink of motherhood, blindsided by the husband she thought she knew. Buckle up for a tumultuous tale that leaves no one unscathed. Christopher Rise was a man who lived life on a grand scale. Born and raised in Los Angeles, he had built a reputation as the savvy founder of Reyes Capital, a private equity firm rumored to have interests in everything from luxury hotels to green technology startups. At just 40 years old, he embodied the classic American success story, the golden boy who struck gold, seemingly overnight. He was tall and had a chiseled physique that looked effortlessly sculpted. His personal trainer ensured nothing less. Cufflinks bearing his initials CR glimmered against his crisp Armani suits. He traveled in a sleek Mercedes Maybach, outfitted with custom leather interiors. Every piece of his appearance was curated to signal power, affluence, and discerning taste. People gushed about Christopher's alleged generosity. He donated to local schools, sponsored charity galas, and made grand appearances on philanthropic boards. Newspapers lauded his name for revitalizing neglected communities. Indeed, he appeared to be a hero in the public eye. Even in his personal life, Christopher projected the image of a devoted family man. Married to Angela Rise, an introverted but warm-hearted schoolteacher, he glowed with pride whenever he spoke of her. The two had met at a friend's wedding in Hawaii. Angela's demure smile and gentle spirit captivated Christopher from the first hello. She wasn't from money, and perhaps that was the main allure. She was genuine, unpretentious, a stark contrast to the high society circles he navigated daily. When she agreed to marry him, the city's socialites buzzed in envy and curiosity. Who was this quiet schoolteacher who had captured one of LA's most desirable bachelors? After 5 years of marriage, Angela was now pregnant with their first child. Friends found it endearing how Christopher boasted about Angela's glow, how he constantly patted her belly, speaking of the child with unwavering excitement. He'd commissioned a beautiful nursery at their lavish Bel Air home, a tasteful combination of pastel blues, whimsical murals, and plush teddy bears. He wanted everything to be perfect for his heir. The staff whispered about how many thousands of dollars were spent on a handcrafted crib imported from Italy. From the outside, their marriage appeared to be something straight out of a fairy tale. Wealthy prince marries humble girl next door, set against the glitz of Hollywood's backdrop. Angela's pregnancy only intensified the sense of a happily ever after. Photographers loved snapping pictures of the charming couple at charity events, him in his expensive suit, her in flowing maternity gowns. The tabloids ate it up, painting them as modern royalty. But there were tiny cracks in this perfect facade. Angela, in her unassuming nature, often felt uneasy in the flamboyant social scene. While she appreciated Christopher's generosity, she noticed a subtle shift in him over the years. A restlessness, an over-reliance on the admiration of others. Their date nights dwindled as business dinners took precedence. Late-night phone calls and urgent meetings consumed Christopher's schedule. She convinced herself this was the price of success. After all, men like him who built empires from scratch had to work around the clock. Yet in moments of solitude, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He seemed distant even when sitting beside her. Their once intimate conversations had become fleeting check-ins about her health and the baby. No more heartfelt confessions in the twilight hours, no more silly laughter over midnight snacks. But each time worry crept in, Angela would remember his sweet gestures. Like how he insisted on building that dream nursery, or how he had recently organized a splendid baby shower for her, complete with a gold, embossed invitation list. She saw in him the same man who'd once strolled with her barefoot on a Hawaiian beach, who marveled at the sunset in quiet awe. She held on to the hope that these red flags were just the normal growing pains of a high-pressure life. Soon the world would find out how wrong she was. Behind the carefully curated Instagram posts, beyond the philanthropic accolades, Christopher Rise was playing a dangerous game. And one night, in the heart of Los Angeles, an unexpected camera would capture it all, flinging the truth into the public domain, leaving no corner to hide. In a city fueled by gossip and glamour, Christopher Rise's elevated status made him a prime subject of speculation. His every move, business or personal, was dissected at length in social circles. Rumors had swirled for months that Christopher was spending more time in the company of a stunning brunette who was most definitely not his wife. No one dared confront him, of course. He had the kind of wealth and connections that made confrontation a dangerous gamble. Plus, Angela's pregnancy offered an additional shield. Who would assume a man broadcasting fatherhood pride would stoop to infidelity? But the rumors persisted. Word of mouth trickled from private gatherings, from hush-hush business dinners, from exclusive after-parties. The name Felicia surfaced quietly in these hushed conversations, followed by raised eyebrows and pregnant pauses. Some claimed she was an aspiring actress trying to break into Hollywood. Others said she was an emerging fashion influencer, known for her sultry Instagram posts, replete with designer brands and exotic locations. Whichever the truth, she had definitely caught Christopher's eye. Felicia was rumored to frequent the rooftop bar of the lavish Ritz-Carlton in downtown LA, where the city's elite mingled over top-shelf cocktails. It was a place where deals worth millions were negotiated over a single evening, and discreet liaisons were an open secret. No paparazzi could sneak past the hotel's vigilant security. For the powerful and wealthy, it was a fortress of indulgence and secrecy. One particular evening, Christopher, under the pretense of meeting an investor, found himself at that very rooftop bar. The skyline twinkled in the background like scattered diamonds. Scented candles flickered on polished tables, and smooth jazz played softly in the air. Felicia arrived wearing a figure-hugging black dress that shimmered under the ambient lighting. Her lips, painted a daring shade of red, curved into a knowing smile as she spotted Christopher. They greeted each other with an embrace that lingered a few seconds too long for mere acquaintances. And thus began a night of indulgence, replete with imported champagne, whispers in dark corners, and promises neither intended to keep. Christopher was enthralled by her. She was the polar opposite of Angela's gentle composure, an unapologetic tempest of ambition and seduction. Felicia saw Christopher as a golden ticket into higher echelons of Hollywood. He was her chance to skip the uncertain audition grind and waltz into starring roles, high-profile endorsements, and an opulent lifestyle. Their connection quickly became a routine of sorts. Christopher would text Felicia from his private phone, one Angela had no idea existed, to arrange secret rendezvous. Sometimes he'd whisk her away for weekend getaways in exclusive resorts along the California coastline. Other times, he'd pamper her with lavish gifts, a diamond necklace from Tiffany and Company, limited edition handbags from Louis Vuitton, 6IP access to events. Felicia, who was used to scraping by in dingy apartments, soaked up this new life like a desert plant in rare rain. Yet for all his cunning, Christopher was reckless in his duplicity. He used company funds to lavish Felicia with extravagances, labeling them as client entertainment expenses. He took few precautions in covering his tracks. Arrogance had lulled him into believing he was invincible, too powerful, too connected for anyone to challenge him. Angela, in her loyalty, gave him no reason to suspect she would ever doubt him. The staff, dependent on Christopher for their livelihoods, kept their mouths shut. Still, there were glimpses of a moral compass flickering in Christopher moments that made him question the path he was hurtling down. Usually, these moments arrived in the quiet of night when he'd return home and see Angela peacefully asleep, her hands protectively resting over her growing belly. The realization that soon he would be a father sometimes filled him with both terror and excitement. He was about to shape a new life, to define what it meant to be a rise. But those reservations always dissolved under Felicia's spell by day, when reality was overshadowed by her well-curved silhouette and the shimmering lights of a city that never judged so long as you had the cash to cushion your sins. What Christopher failed to grasp was that Los Angeles was a land where secrets always slipped through the cracks. Discretion was a currency only as good as one's ability to pay for silence. And in his arrogance, Christopher underestimated how easily fortunes could shift. The stage was set for betrayal, and neither he nor Felicia sensed the sharpened cameras and relentless curiosity aimed in their direction. While Angela, blissfully unaware, nested and prepared for motherhood, a bomb of scandal was ticking, ready to explode. Felicia Rodriguez was no stranger to life's hardships. Raised in a small town near the Mexican border, she'd arrived in Los Angeles with stars in her eyes, determined to become Hollywood's next leading lady. The reality was a barrage of casting calls, rejections, and questionable living conditions. She had briefly tried working as a cocktail waitress while juggling auditions, but LA was expensive, and the dream seemed to move further away each day. She was on the verge of packing her bags when she encountered Christopher at a charity gala, an event to which she'd snuck in as a +1 of a friend's friend. Her striking beauty, accentuated by a fierce confidence, caught Christopher's attention. He introduced himself with that self-assured grin, offered her a glass of champagne, and asked about her aspirations. She thought it was a typical pickup line. But soon enough, she learned that behind that charming exterior lay an incalculable fortune, and behind those polite questions was a desire for something beyond conversation. She recognized a lucrative opportunity. He recognized a thrilling escape. In their first few meetings, Felicia played her part meticulously. She gushed over Christopher's stories, laughed at his jokes, and gazed at him with admiration that inflated his ego to the point of no return. She listened to him brag about philanthropic endeavors, about turning struggling neighborhoods into luxurious complexes. Secretly, she found his so-called charity hypocritical, but she never let that cynicism slip. She was an actress after all, and performing in this real-life scenario came naturally. As the affair progressed, Felicia set her sights on a bigger prize, a stable foothold in Christopher's life. No longer did she want just expensive gifts or fleeting weekends. She wanted influence, security, a connection that could catapult her into the Hollywood echelon. She had tried forging relationships with directors and producers on her own, but each meeting ended in disappointment or, worse, exploitation. With Christopher's backing, she could surpass the need for them altogether. Why wait to be cast in a film when you had someone who could finance the production? In the shadows of glitzy hotel rooms, she pressed him for more. More roles, more introductions, more influence. Initially, Christopher was caught off guard. He was used to adoration, not negotiation. Yet Felicia's allure had him hooked. Perhaps it was her electric presence, or maybe it was the rush of doing something forbidden. Either way, each time she demanded more, he relented, rationalizing that it was a small price to pay for her companionship. That was how a cunning synergy formed between them. Felicia offered him an intoxicating world of passion, stepping in as a glamorous confidant, while he, in turn, sponsored her for auditions and introduced her to his entertainment world contacts. Soon, he had an informal arrangement with a well-known director. Felicia would land a small but significant role in an upcoming film if Christopher made a generous investment in the production. It was all happening behind closed doors, fueled by whispered promises and hidden bank transfers. However, Felicia wasn't stupid. She knew that if Angela discovered the affair, everything could crumble. The pregnant wife, though unassuming, had the legal status as Christopher's spouse. Anything Felicia gained would pale in comparison to what Angela already possessed as the legitimate partner. It rankled her to imagine that, after all her calculated moves, she still played second fiddle to a woman absent from this glamorous nightlife. Felicia felt she deserved more than being a hush-hush secret in hotel corridors. She wanted the same power and recognition that Angela enjoyed. She wanted to be the queen on the throne, not the jester hidden in the background. Her resentment brewed. She began urging Christopher to consider a different path. What if he divorced Angela? She'd plant seeds of discontent, citing how much of his time he already spent with Felicia, how he deserved a partner who understood the demands of the spotlight, how Angela's traditional lifestyle would eventually bore him. Felicia whispered these notions skillfully, careful not to appear pushy, always framing her suggestions in the language of empowerment and self-love. "Don't you deserve real happiness, Christopher?" she would say, her voice soft and inviting. Every time Angela's name was uttered, Christopher would tense up. He'd remind Felicia that Angela was pregnant, that a divorce now would be monstrous. He still clung to the idea of fatherhood as a symbol of his legacy. It was a paradox that he wanted to sustain two universes, the public image of a doting husband and father, and the secret world where he could indulge his desires without consequence. As Felicia's frustration escalated, her demands grew. She pressed for more opulent gifts, a better car, even a high-end apartment in Beverly Hills. And Christopher, cornered by guilt and lust, complied. After all, what was the cost of a few million when you had a net worth in the hundreds of millions? He justified it as an investment in his personal happiness, though deep down, he knew the real price for betrayal was yet to be paid. In a city that thrived on secrets, Felicia was thriving. Little did she know, however, that a single revelation, one captured frame, would soon unravel everything she had built. She thought she had Christopher wrapped around her finger. She presumed Angela was too naive to suspect anything. Yet fate, or perhaps karma, had already set events in motion that would expose Felicia's schemes and Christopher's complicity to the entire world. Angela Reyes had never been the type to pry. She believed in giving people space, in trusting wholeheartedly, especially the man she loved. Yet as her pregnancy advanced, she noticed a distance she couldn't dismiss. Christopher was distracted, perpetually checking his phone and returning home at odd hours. His classic explanations, business expansions, urgent investor meetings still sounded believable, but the pit in her stomach wouldn't let her rest. Some nights, she'd sit by the bay window in their Bel Air mansion, stroking her belly in a rocking chair, staring out into the manicured lawn and the distant glow of city lights. She'd think back to their early days, how Christopher would rush home just to share dinner, how he'd shower her with small tokens of affection, a handwritten note, a simple flower from the garden, just to see her smile. Those gestures had become rare. One evening, Angela mustered the courage to question Christopher openly. They were seated at the dining table, about to eat. She brought up his increasing absences and longed to hear him say it was all in her head. Instead, he grew defensive. He scoffed, telling her he was doing everything for the family, that those meetings were critical to secure their future. He reminded her of how he'd grown Reyes Capital from the ground up. "This is how we maintain the lifestyle you and our child deserve," he insisted. His tone stung. Angela wasn't used to him sounding so harsh, so dismissive of her emotions. She retreated, whispering an apology for doubting him, but her anxiety only deepened. She noticed he avoided eye contact, busying himself with his phone or faking sudden interest in some text message. A few minutes later, he excused himself from the table, claiming urgent business. The half-eaten meal grew cold before Angela's eyes. Still, she tried to be supportive. She passed off her suspicions as hormonal paranoia. After all, pregnant women often experienced anxiety, right? She convinced herself that Christopher was under monumental stress. However, a faint voice in her mind refused to be silenced. As the months wore on, a few things happened that Angela couldn't easily ignore. First, she accidentally discovered a credit card statement tucked under a pile of paperwork in his office. It detailed extravagant charges at luxury hotels and high-end boutiques, places she had never visited. When she confronted Christopher, he brushed it off as client entertainment expenses. She accepted his explanation, albeit reluctantly, but her heart felt heavier. Then there was the phone call. Late one night, as she was half asleep, Christopher's phone buzzed. He was in the shower, so Angela glanced at the phone to see if it was urgent. A message on the lock screen read, "When will I see you again?" Signed with a lipstick kiss emoji. She felt her pulse quicken. Before she could read more, Christopher snatched the phone from her hands, his expression livid. He claimed it was a prank text from a business acquaintance, said the conversation was out of context, and demanded she respect his privacy. Distraught, Angela spent the night sobbing quietly. She started second-guessing every reassurance he had given her. Even if she tried to remain trusting, the evidence was piling up. She confided in her best friend, Monica, who urged her to be cautious. Monica had once seen Christopher at a restaurant in downtown LA, acting suspiciously chummy with a woman in an elegant dress. At the time, Monica hadn't wanted to worry a pregnant Angela, but the guilt of withholding that information gnawed at her. Now, everything was falling into place like jagged puzzle pieces. Angela was left in a state of turmoil. She felt alone in that vast mansion, empty except for domestic staff who treated her with polite distance. Christopher's presence became increasingly sporadic, as if he was actively avoiding confrontation. Yet she couldn't bear the thought of blowing up her marriage. She wanted this child to have a stable family, a father who was present, a home filled with love rather than bitter accusations. So, Angela did what she had always done. She held her doubts inside and prayed that everything was just a bad phase. She reminded herself of their wedding vows, the joys they had once shared, and the child growing inside her. She tried to coax him into marriage counseling, but each mention was met with an eye roll or a dismissive wave. Work was simply too crazy right now. Her motherly instincts, however, wouldn't rest. Every sense she had told her something was very wrong. She just couldn't pinpoint the who, the when, or the where. If only she knew how drastically the truth would soon be revealed to everyone in a manner that no denial or excuse could bury. Her longing to keep the peace would collide violently with an explosive wave of public scandal that even Christopher, in all his wealth and influence, couldn't control. It was a balmy summer evening in Los Angeles, one of those nights when the sky was tinged with burnt orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Christopher had arranged another business meeting with Felicia at the Ritz-Carlton rooftop. He'd grown too comfortable in this routine, feeling untouchable amid the swanky, low-lit bar where managers knew him by name and never asked too many questions. Earlier that day, he'd texted Felicia, "Need to see you tonight." Important. She responded with a teasing, "Your wish is my command," complete with a playful wink emoji. In the back of his mind, Christopher knew he was rolling the dice. His wife was due in just a couple of months, and each secret rendezvous felt riskier. But he craved Felicia's presence, or perhaps the escape she represented. That night, Felicia arrived wearing a slinky red dress that hugged her figure in all the right ways. Heads turned as she made her grand entrance, scanning the crowd until she spotted Christopher at a private corner table. They ordered champagne, glancing around to ensure no uninvited gazes lingered. Yet they overlooked a critical detail. A local freelance photographer, Nate Morgan, was also at the rooftop bar, invited by a friend to celebrate a personal milestone. He wasn't there on assignment, but serendipity had other plans. Nate recognized Christopher immediately. His face was plastered across philanthropic events and business magazines. Nate had even photographed a couple of events where Christopher spoke about community building. Intrigued by the fact that Christopher was not there with Angela, who was famously pregnant, Nate subtly snapped a few shots, planning to do a quick social media post. But as he watched, it became clear that Christopher and this mystery woman were more than friends. The way she leaned into him, the intimate laughter they shared, it spoke volumes. Nate's journalistic instincts kicked in. He discreetly angled his camera, capturing high-resolution images of Christopher sliding an opulent diamond bracelet onto Felicia's wrist. The way she kissed him on the cheek, the smile on his face as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Each shot painted a damning narrative of an affair. Nate didn't know the full story, but understood that these photos could be explosive, especially if pitched to the right outlet. Meanwhile, at the table, Felicia teased Christopher about finalizing her role in a new film. He was frustrated because the negotiations with the director were more expensive than he had anticipated. Yet, Felicia demanded that he push forward. She wanted her time in the limelight. "If you really love me," she purred, "you'd make it happen." Christopher, too enthralled to think rationally, assured her that money was no object. They remained oblivious to Nate's discreet camera shutter. After about an hour of flirting, laughter, and whispered promises, they left together, hand in hand. Nate followed at a distance, capturing photos as they descended the elevator and exited into a sleek sports car. As the car's taillights disappeared into the LA night, Nate glanced at his digital screen. He had gold in his camera photos that could spark a media firestorm. He was torn. Selling them to a tabloid would be profitable, but also an invasion of privacy. Yet, he reasoned, if Christopher was the upstanding man he portrayed himself to be, these pictures wouldn't exist in the first place. Nate didn't rush home to sell them. He spent the next day mulling over what to do. In a city where paparazzi culture reigned supreme, juicy stories fetched tens of thousands, if not more. And Christopher Rise was a prime target, rich, influential, with a pregnant wife. The betrayal angle was sensational, but Nate, though no saint, felt a pang of conscience. Should he bring heartbreak to a pregnant woman? Two events shifted his hesitation. First, a casual conversation with an editor friend who hinted that newspapers would pay top dollar for any exclusive on Christopher Rise. Second, an unexpected message from Angela Reyes's best friend Monica, who had recognized Nate's name from local community events and asked if he'd heard anything about Christopher's rumored affair. She was desperate for the truth, to protect Angela if nothing else. Nate realized he had stumbled upon a moral crossroads, help reveal the truth, and potentially free Angela from lies, or keep it all buried. He told Monica he had something important but made no promises. That night, He studied the images again. He saw the unguarded expression on Christopher's face, so different from the philanthropic mask he wore. Felicia looked triumphant, full of pride at the conquest. It left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. By the following morning, the decision was made. Nate reached out to a tabloid journalist known for breaking high-profile scandals, hinting at exclusive photos. He also confided in Monica that he'd unearthed proof. In doing so, Nate set in motion a chain of events that would blow the Rays' marriage wide open, sending shockwaves through the city, the media, and eventually the quiet halls of Angela's Bel Air mansion. The headlines struck like lightning. Millionaire Christopher Rise caught spoiling mistress while pregnant wife awaits at home. Within hours, social media platforms buzzed with chatter, re-sharing the leaked photographs that left little room for denial. The pictures spread from gossip blogs to mainstream news outlets like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the diamond bracelet, the affectionate embraces, the undeniable chemistry between Christopher and a mystery woman identified as Felicia Rodriguez. Christopher first caught wind of the scandal during an emergency board meeting at Reyes Capital. One of his senior advisors hurried into the conference room, pale-faced, and whispered that the tabloids had broken a damning story. Christopher dismissed the notion with bravado until he saw the actual images. His chest tightened and a surge of panic coursed through him. He ended the meeting abruptly and locked himself in his office, frantically calling his PR team. Meanwhile, Angela was at home, nesting in the baby's nursery. She was in a blissful moment, organizing tiny socks and imagining a future with her child. The sudden buzz of her phone broke that serenity. Texts and calls poured in friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives. They had all seen the news, and each message was a swirl of horror, sympathy, or sometimes gawking curiosity. Confused and overwhelmed, Angela opened her browser and found the images. Her world collapsed in an instant. In the pictures, Christopher beamed at Felicia like a doting lover. The sight turned Angela's stomach. She recognized the diamond bracelet. It was from a limited edition Tiffany & Company collection, worth more than any car she had ever owned. She had no idea he'd bought such a thing, her throat constricted, tears burning her eyes. The betrayal was stark, undeniable. All of her nightmares were real. For a moment, she clutched her belly, feeling a rush of protective instinct for her unborn child. Then came the fury. She paced back and forth, phone in hand, trying to decide if she should confront Christopher, call the tabloids, or simply run away from this heartbreak. Monica's voice echoed through her thoughts, reminding her that she deserved truth, respect, and love. The baby deserved parents who weren't living in a facade. Across town, Felicia was cornered in her own swirl of chaos. Her phone rang incessantly, friends, scandal-hungry reporters, even fans who followed her budding influencer account. The tabloids had blasted her image for the world to see, labeling her a homewrecker, a gold digger. She'd hoped for fame, but not like this. Her big break was overshadowed by the stench of scandal. Film directors she had schmoozed were now wary of a PR nightmare, uncertain if casting her would bring them more trouble than profit. She cursed the photographer who had captured them and cursed Christopher for not being more discreet. In the midst of it all, Christopher's PR team scrambled to spin the story. They offered statements claiming the photos were taken out of context, that Felicia was simply a close friend, but the intimate nature of the pictures shredded that excuse. Anonymous sources from the Ritz-Carlton staff started speaking to media outlets, describing how Christopher and Felicia often met there. The rumor mill churned out new details each hour: secret getaways, lavish gifts, hush money. The scandal swelled into a hurricane of public judgment. Christopher tried calling Angela multiple times, but she refused to pick up. She was done playing the gullible wife. Summoning the courage that had lain dormant beneath her gentle demeanor, Angela decided to take control. She called her family lawyer for advice, uncertain if she wanted a divorce, but certain she needed to protect herself and her child. She also needed space to think. She packed a small suitcase and arranged to stay with Monica for a few days. Before leaving, she wrote Christopher a short note. "I saw the photos. I can't believe you would do this to us. I'm leaving to clear my head. Don't contact me until you're ready to tell me the truth, Angela." The staff looked on, heartbroken and apologetic, but powerless. Angela walked out, tears streaming down her face, hand on her belly, determined to hold on to dignity, even as her world unraveled. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she had to do it for her sanity and for the unborn life she cherished. Outside, the paparazzi had already formed a mob, cameras flashing, shouting invasive questions. Angela lowered her head, her friend Monica shielding her. A wave of empathy and outrage rippled across the city. Social media users condemned Christopher's betrayal, championed Angela's courage, and dragged Felicia through the mud of moral judgment. Overnight, Christopher Rise, once hailed as a philanthropic icon, became the poster boy for infidelity and scandal. Sponsors for his community projects pulled out. Influential associates distanced themselves. Stockholders questioned the stability of Reyes Capital, with its figurehead embroiled in a sensational fiasco. Even the so-called philanthropic boards, on which Christopher sat quietly, asked him to step away for personal reasons. The first cracks in his empire were visible. He had prided himself on being above reproach, but arrogance had led him astray. Now the world saw him for what he truly was, a man who used his fortune to indulge private sins. The consequences would only multiply from here, and for the first time in his life, Christopher felt powerless to stop the destruction he'd set in motion. In the days that followed, the scandal snowballed into a multi-faceted nightmare. The local news stations ran stories about Christopher's affair on a near-constant loop. One segment even juxtaposed footage of Angela's baby shower, where Christopher had been a doting husband, with the newly leaked images of him and Felicia in intimate poses. Late-night talk show hosts took jabs at Christopher's hypocrisy, fueling public mockery. Memes flooded social media, depicting Christopher as a wolf in sheep's clothing, Felicia as a scheming seductress, and Angela as the unwitting martyr. Angela remained with Monica, shielding herself from the onslaught of paparazzi and media queries. She turned off her notifications, but couldn't escape the barrage entirely. Even grocery store lines had tabloids bearing Christopher's face. Monica insisted that Angela focus on her health, reminding her that stress could affect the baby. Each day, Angela's resilience wavered between heartbreak and fury, between longing for her husband's confession and the realization she might never trust him again. Christopher, in the meantime, found himself under siege. His PR firm's damage control strategy floundered. Public apologies didn't suffice because the affair was brazenly documented. The evidence was too incriminating. He released a statement acknowledging a lapse in judgment and expressing deep regret, but that did little to quell the outrage. Investors began pulling out of Reyes Capital deals, worried that the scandal would tarnish their reputations as well. The board of directors convened emergency sessions to assess how best to protect the company if Christopher's personal meltdown dragged them into legal or financial quagmires. On top of that, Christopher's attorneys faced new challenges. Felicia, panicked by her public vilification and the possibility of losing a foothold in Hollywood, had begun pressuring Christopher to ensure her financial security. She demanded hush money, threatening to sell more details of their affair or pen a tell-all interview if he refused. Fearful of deeper humiliation, Christopher arranged sizable payments, funneling them through shell companies. But the scandal had already peaked, And Felicia's revelations wouldn't make it much worse, except that if she spilled everything, it might hint at misappropriation of company funds. In Angela's corner, a dedicated family lawyer named Diana Hall took charge. She was known for handling high-profile divorce cases with both compassion and rigor. Though Angela hadn't definitively decided on divorce, Diana prepared for that possibility. She gathered documents related to Christopher's financials, knowing he'd likely attempt to hide assets. Diana also secured a restraining order against paparazzi who had harassed Angela, ensuring her privacy during this tumultuous phase. Public sentiment largely rallied around Angela. The city that once saw her as a peripheral figure, just a quiet school teacher, now hailed her as a symbol of grace amidst betrayal. Anonymous supporters sent care packages to Monica's address, baby gifts accompanied by heartfelt letters. Hashtags like #StandWithAngela trended on Twitter, urging women not to tolerate infidelity and betrayal. In a twisted sense, Angela found solidarity in strangers, though she would have traded it all to turn back time and preserve her unbroken family. Christopher finally mustered the courage to reach out to Angela. He left dozens of voice messages, each a variation of the same plea: "I'm sorry, this all spiraled out of control. I love you and the baby." He begged her to come home. But every apology felt hollow because he offered no honest explanation for his actions, no willingness to come clean about the extent of his affair, or any attempt to restore trust. Meanwhile, Felicia watched her life veer off script. She was painted as the ultimate villain, a manipulative temptress with a taste for wealthy married men. Casting directors began avoiding her. Her influencer sponsorships evaporated overnight. She clung to Christopher's hush money as her only lifeline, but resented that she couldn't flaunt her connection to him publicly anymore. What was the point of seducing a millionaire if you had to stay in the shadows, despised by the masses? Throughout the city, from Hollywood Hills to Santa Monica, people discussed the downfall of Christopher Reyes as a cautionary tale of hubris. If someone with his philanthropic reputation could stoop so low, how many other celebrities hid skeletons in their diamond-studded closets? Amid this whirlwind, Angela's baby continued to grow, an innocent life unaware of the chaos outside. Angela spent quiet evenings with Monica, reading parenting books, taking prenatal vitamins, and attending doctor's appointments in secrecy. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but each gentle kick from her unborn child reminded her of the reason to keep fighting. Whether she forgave Christopher or left him behind, she had a responsibility to stand firm and ensure her child's well-being. Little did they all know, the seeds of karma were still developing. The fallout from Christopher's betrayal would stretch beyond lost endorsements and broken hearts. A far harsher blow was yet to come, a reckoning no hush money could contain, no PR spin could erase. This scandal was merely the prologue to a deeper collapse that threatened to consume Christopher's wealth, his ambitions, and perhaps even his freedom. Unbeknownst to Christopher, a separate investigation was unfolding, one that had nothing to do with his affair at first, but would soon entangle everything. Federal authorities had been scrutinizing Reyes Capital for alleged financial irregularities. A few whistleblowers within the company claimed that Christopher misused corporate funds for personal expenses, luxury gifts for an unidentified woman, extravagant hotel bills, lavish weekend trips, disguised as business retreats. At first, the authorities considered it a standard inquiry, the kind that rarely made headlines. But once Christopher's scandal broke, the dots connected in a glaring pattern of abuse. Late one afternoon, just as Christopher was reeling from investor withdrawals, agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) and the FBI arrived at Reyes Capital's headquarters with search warrants. They seized files, computers, transaction records. Employees were questioned about financial statements. Panic swept through the office. Christopher, summoned from a crisis meeting with his lawyers, stood helpless as federal agents combed through his domain, collecting evidence. Social media erupted anew. Now, the trending headlines weren't just about Christopher's infidelity, but about potential embezzlement and fraud. Millionaire playboy under federal investigation, one site screamed. The public, already furious at Christopher for betraying Angela, reveled in seeing his empire threatened. Comments online ranged from moral outrage to schadenfreude. The once beloved philanthropist was now a pariah, his name synonymous with deceit on every level. This investigation signaled the beginning of a brutal unraveling. Sponsors who had initially paused their association with Christopher now severed ties altogether. Charitable boards expelled him. Potential deals collapsed overnight. Reyes Capital's stock value plummeted, driven by the perception that the company's stability hinged on Christopher's tarnished reputation. Lawsuits from shareholders loomed, accusing him of breaching fiduciary duties by using company resources for personal indulgences. Even Felicia felt the tremors. She had benefited from those misappropriated funds, trips, gifts, and dinners that might now be traced. She feared legal repercussions, or at least a summons to testify. Her dream of stardom had become a nightmare of potential criminal entanglement. She sent frantic messages to Christopher, demanding he ensure she was protected. But Christopher was fighting for his own survival. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. Angela, meanwhile, watched the downfall from Monica's home with a mixture of sorrow and grim satisfaction. She didn't relish his suffering, but felt an undeniable sense of justice. He had deceived her, betrayed the sanctity of their marriage, and flaunted his affair. Now, the universe seemed to be balancing the scales. She met with Diana, her lawyer, to discuss potential next steps. Diana advised that Angela might be wise to finalize a legal separation or divorce soon. If Christopher's assets were frozen or seized, securing future financial support for her child would be far more complicated. Yet Angela hesitated. She still wrestled with her conscience. She had once loved Christopher deeply, and he was the father of her unborn child. Was there a shred of humanity left in him, or was he entirely consumed by greed and lust? Perhaps her best move was to protect herself legally while keeping lines of communication open, hoping that he might come to his senses and at least ensure their child's future was secure. Meanwhile, Felicia's world continued to implode. She received scathing letters from Christopher's corporate lawyers, implying that if she were subpoenaed, she should carefully consider her statements to avoid incriminating the company, or else she might face defamation suits. Felicia realized she was expendable. Christopher might throw her under the bus to preserve what little remained of his empire. She felt trapped, isolated, and resentful. In the span of a few weeks, Christopher lost nearly everything he had taken for granted: public admiration, financial stability, social standing, and the unwavering support of a wife who had adored him. He was now the subject of ridicule and potential criminal charges. Late at night, as he paced through the vast, empty halls of his mansion, Angela gone, staff reduced, he replayed each step that had led him here. How had he let arrogance and lust dismantle his life? Every so often he thought of that child, growing inside Angela's womb, a child he was on the brink of losing the chance to know. A wave of regret would surge, briefly giving him the urge to fix things, to atone. But then he'd receive another frantic phone call from his lawyers, or a menacing demand from Felicia, and the guilt would harden into resentment. He told himself he'd been victimized by the media, used by Felicia, misunderstood by the public. The notion that his choices had triggered this downfall was almost too painful to accept. Karma, however, was unconcerned with his rationalizations. It was in motion, unstoppable. The crisis that had begun with scandalous photographs would continue to escalate, plunging Christopher into a new realm of hardship. This was bigger than a bruised ego or a suspended endorsement. This was the spectre of criminal indictment and financial ruin. Each revelation brought him closer to a reckoning, one that would demand he either confront his worst failings or be consumed by them entirely. The final blow to Christopher's illusions came on a Wednesday morning, a day as bright as any in Los Angeles. He was summoned to a federal courthouse for an initial hearing. His attorneys had negotiated a temporary release on bond, but the gravity of the situation was palpable. Cameras flashed violently as he tried to duck into the building. Protesters stood outside, chanting slogans against corruption. Paparazzi barked questions about Felicia and Angela, about whether Christopher planned to flee the country. Inside, the sterile corridors only heightened his dread. The presiding judge read out the charges, multiple counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds. Each carried severe penalties, including heavy fines and prison time. While Christopher's lawyers were prepared to fight, the evidence the government had compiled was staggering: bank statements, internal memos, testimonies from staff. It was only a preliminary hearing, but the message was clear. The authorities weren't letting this go. Emerging from the courthouse, Christopher found Angela waiting for him outside. The sight of her standing against the swirl of cameras and onlookers took his breath away. She was visibly pregnant, her face pale but determined. The media parted like the Red Sea, enthralled by the possibility of a confrontation. But Angela wasn't there to humiliate him further. She was there seeking closure. They locked eyes, both uncertain. Finally, Angela asked quietly, "Why?" It was the simplest and most piercing question, carrying all her heartbreak and disbelief. Christopher swallowed hard, tears threatening to break through his carefully maintained composure. He tried to speak, but fumbled. So much needed saying: a confession, an apology, an explanation of how greed and vanity had led him astray. But the words failed him. Angela's lawyer nudged her gently, reminding her that this was not the ideal place for a deep conversation. Nevertheless, Angela insisted on a moment alone. The throng of reporters was relentless. Microphones thrust forward. Security cleared a path, and they managed to find a quiet corner behind the courthouse. There, Angela confronted Christopher with tears in her eyes. "You've destroyed everything," she said, voice shaking. Was it worth it? Christopher stood there, silent. The heaviness of his regret pressed down like a physical weight. He told her he was sorry, that he'd never intended to hurt her, that he lost sight of what mattered. Angela's tears fell freely as she told him how humiliated she felt, how betrayed. Yet amid the anger, she was also afraid for him, for the child she carried, for what their future might hold. Christopher finally confessed the scope of his affair. He admitted how deep he'd fallen into Felicia's grasp, how he used company money to indulge his fantasies, how he thought he could keep it a secret forever. He apologized again and again, though each apology felt insufficient. Angela listened, heart heavy, realizing that he was no longer the man she married, the man who once walked barefoot with her on a Hawaiian beach, or maybe he never was that man at all. "I loved you," she said, voice breaking. "I would have stood by you through anything, but not this level of betrayal. Not when you put yourself above our marriage, our baby." Christopher tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. The swirl of reporters began to notice their private talk was ending, inching closer for a quote. Angela looked at Christopher one last time, sadness etched into her features. "I have to protect our child now," she said. "Do what you need to do to fix yourself, but don't expect me to wait." She walked off, escorted by her lawyer, leaving Christopher rooted in place. Cameras followed her every step, capturing the heartbreak on her face, the final severing of their bond. In that moment, Christopher understood that he had lost Angela's trust, possibly forever. The road to redemption, if it existed, would be steep and solitary. Later that night, as Christopher tried to find solace in the mansion that now felt more like a prison, he realized he was truly alone. Felicia was gone, having fled to New York to chase fleeting offers of tabloid interviews. His staff had been mostly laid off. Even close friends stopped calling. He poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey, one of the last bottles left in his once lavish collection, and stared at the nursery he had designed with so much excitement. He pictured what life might have been like if he'd remained faithful, if he'd been content with Angela's love instead of succumbing to greed and lust. Instead, the echoing walls around him spelled out the price he had paid. Soon, a trial would determine his legal fate, and Angela might finalize a divorce. His child would be born into a fractured family. Once upon a time, Christopher Rise thought he ruled the city, a god among men. Now, he was just another cautionary tale, undone by the very vices he refused to keep in check. The last shred of hope he clung to was the possibility of regaining a sliver of dignity by facing the consequences head-on. Perhaps in doing so, he could earn the right to be a father to his child, even if Angela never forgave him. As summer edged into autumn, Christopher Rise faced his day in court. The prosecution laid out damning evidence, falsified expense reports, hidden accounts, and testimonies from former Reyes Capital staff. Expenditures labeled as client entertainment were revealed to be lavish gifts, trips, and secret indulgences for Felicia. Before the jury, the once respected philanthropist stood exposed as a manipulator willing to breach ethics and loyalty. Christopher was convicted of misusing company funds and committing financial fraud. The judge sentenced him to several years in federal prison and ordered substantial restitution for shareholders. Shortly after the verdict, Reyes Capital declared bankruptcy, leaving furious investors demanding further compensation. Felicia, though spared from prison, found herself blacklisted in the entertainment industry, her reputation forever tainted by scandal. During this tumult, Angela gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Matteo. She chose to step away from the spotlight, returning to her teaching career and moving into a modest home. Though she remained deeply hurt, Angela focused on providing her son with a stable, loving environment, determined to shield him from the disgrace attached to his father's name. A few weeks later, Angela visited Christopher in prison, bringing Matteo in her arms. Dressed in his prison uniform, Christopher appeared drawn and hollow, momentarily stunned at the sight of his child. Overcome with regret, he offered apology after apology, acknowledging the pain he had caused. Angela listened, her emotions churning. While uncertain she could ever forgive him, she permitted the meeting so Christopher could see his son because, despite everything, Matteo deserved the chance to know his father. In that stark visitation room, Christopher realized just how far he had fallen and how high the cost of his betrayal truly was. From a carefree millionaire to an inmate counting each day behind bars, Christopher's downfall was sealed by his own greed and disloyalty. Angela, for her part, gathered her courage, choosing to build a future for herself and her son untainted by lies. They both knew some wounds may never fully heal, but Angela believed in one small mercy, that she and Matteo could find new beginnings, even if Christopher's redemption lay behind prison gates. So there you have it, a web of deceit, desire, and disaster, proving that even a millionaire can tumble from grace when arrogance meets temptation. Christopher Rise thought his wealth could hide his sins, but the harsh light of truth left him stripped of money, influence, and the wife he once adored. Felicia found infamy but lost the respect she craved, and Angela, though betrayed, emerged stronger, choosing a path of integrity for herself and her child. What's the moral? No empire, no fortune, and no shining public image can shield you from the consequences of betraying those you claim to love. The camera captured one salacious night, but it exposed a far deeper corruption, one that could not be disguised. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to hit like, share it with friends who love a dramatic twist, and subscribe to this channel for more incredible true-to-life tales. Thank you for watching.